is a review of something that most of you covered last year, but there's always room for refreshment, right? If you've ever felt questionable about secondary dominance or chromatic harmony in general, it's good to hear it again. And if you feel very confident with secondary dominance and chromatic harmony in general, it's always good to hear it from a fresh perspective. If nothing else, it gives you additional language for explaining that topic someday to students of your own. Chromatic harmony means that we're going to introduce accidentals from outside of the key into our harmony. And secondary dominance is the first and one of the most basic ways to do this. But before we delve into the topic of secondary dominance, I think we should return to dominance in general. What makes them work? What is a diatonic dominant chord? Let's refresh. We will start in Niles' favorite key, which is
D minor.
D minor. What's the key signature?
1 flat. D flat.
So in D minor, we can build triads like this on top of any scale degree. These triads have different qualities. Our 1 triad is what quality? Please feel free to shout it out.
Minor.
Minor, exactly. 2 is it's not minor, but rather
Diminished.
diminished. 3 is, 4 is, 5 is, assuming we're using the leading tone, major. 6 is, and our 7 chord, assuming we are also raising the leading tone, would be diminished as well. Let's switch over to major keys, and we will be in your favorite major key, which is
C major.
besides C major,
A major.
A major. In the key of A major, we can do the same thing, and we will discover that most of these qualities have changed. I'm going to actually begin in a lower octave, so we have enough space. In a major key, the 1 triad has what quality?
Major.
The 2 triad has what quality?
Minor.
3,
Okay.
4,
Major.
5,
Major.
6,
Minor.
and 7.
Diminished.
Now, of these triads between the major and minor key, only 2 have the same quality. And those would be which 2? Well, 2 is actually diminished here. I just forgot to write the circle. Which other 2?
5 and 7.
Exactly. 5 and 7 maintain their quality in the minor key, which coming from the major key. In fact, we use accidentals to make sure that this is the case, that they do have the same quality, major and diminished respectively. So, what else do these 2 triads have in common?
B natural.
They have the same. The 5 has. Okay. The root of the 7 chord is the same as the 3rd and the 5 chord.
You're absolutely right, and I think what you're saying is that they both share the leading tone, so it would be 7. And this is an introduction to a larger point, which is that both of these triads, 5 and 7, share a function. And we can make a quick chart of triadic function up here on the board, which is quite useful to demonstrate this. When I refer to triadic function, what I'm talking about is the job that a triad performs within a harmonic progression. There are 4 jobs available. Triads can function as a tonic, as a mediant, as a predominant, or as a dominant. And they are classified as follows. There can be only 1 tonic, and that would be which triad? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, exactly. And I'm going to use the major key Roman numerals, but please know that it's the same in a minor key, okay? The mediant functioning triads are 3 and 6. the predominant functioning triads are 2 and 4. The dominant functioning triads are 5 and 7. And that brings us back to the tonic. And the way that we've drawn them up here on this chart shows their relative strengths. Moving from left to right, we move from weaker functioning triads to stronger functioning triads. And within harmonic progressions in common practice harmonic writing, we tend to move from weaker to stronger, such that once we arrive at a tonic, we can move to a median functioning chord, a predominant functioning chord, a dominant functioning chord. Median functioning chords have quite a weak function, so they can go to predominant, dominant, or even back to the tonic. However, predominant functioning chords have a stronger function than median functioning chords. So it would be very unusual to see a 2 chord move backwards to a 3, or a 4 chord move backwards to a 6. Rather, predominant functioning chords tend to move either to a dominant or to the tonic. And dominant functioning chords have only one job, and their job is to take us to 1. When we're moving from left to right along this chart, we call this progressive motion, meaning going forwards. When we move from right to left, we call this retrogressive motion. It's less common. Now, at this point, usually someone asks, is it possible to have retrogressive motion in common practice music? And the answer, of course, is yes. Anything is possible. And there's one very common example of retrogressive movement, which is from 5 all the way back to 6, a dominant functioning chord moving to a median functioning chord. This is what we call deceptive motion. However, the reason that that motion is deceptive is because it's unexpected. Normally, when we hear a 5 harmony, we expect that 5 harmony to take us to 1, according to the laws of this chart. And when it moves not from 5 to 1, but from 5 to 6 instead, we are surprised. We are deceived, hence deceptive motion. For the most part, the function, its strength increases as we move from left to right, and we follow this sort of pattern. So, the strongest functioning chords are these ones, the dominant functioning chords. And it's that classification as having a dominant function that both the 5 and 7 triads share. So, part of what makes them have such a strong function seems to be having to do with their shape. And it's the reason that we have to use accidentals to preserve their shape in a minor key. Does this make sense so far? Okay, why don't we take a closer look at the shape of the 5 and 7 triads, and at the shape of those triads when they have upper tensions, like chordal sevenths attached. We will be in Joanne's favorite key, which is major key. G major. So in G major, here is our 5 chord, and here is our 7 chord. The shape of the 5 triad is that of a major triad. We have a major third from D to F sharp, a minor third from F sharp to A. The shape of the 7 triad is that of a diminished triad, a minor third from F sharp to A, and a minor third from A to C. Now, either one of these can carry a 7th as well, and that means that we have an extra note added on top of the triad, also separated by a third. We can classify these as being 5, 7, and the 7 triad, for reasons that we'll get into when we talk about borrowed chords, can have one of 2 possible 7ths. Either a diatonic 7th, which gives us a half diminished shape, minor, minor, and major, like this, or a lowered 7th, which gives us a fully diminished 7th shape, minor, minor, minor. Our 5-7 triad has the shape major, minor, and minor. It's possible for a chord to have additional upper tensions like ninths or 11ths or 13ths, or God help us, 15ths, but for the time being we're going to restrict ourselves to simply 7ths. And we can refer to these and think about them as being the 5 dominant shapes. In other words, these shapes of triads, these particular combinations of thirds, enhance the dominant function of these chords. But, as my friend right here pointed out, that is not the only thing that these chords have in common. Each one of them also has an active leading tone, which we would expect to resolve up by a minor second to the tonic of the key. The leading tone in the key of G major is F sharp, and as we specify F sharp within each one of these chords, we see that for the 5 shapes, the 5 triad and the 5-7 chord, the F sharp is always the third of the chord. We would expect this to resolve upwards from F sharp to G. For the 7 shape, the leading tone is always the root of the chord, and we would expect this to resolve up from minor second by minor second from F sharp to G, like this. So it's the combination of those two parameters, the specific shape and the active leading tone and its position within the chord, that makes these chords have such a powerful function that when we hear them, we perceive them as needing to resolve in one specific way and one way only. Does this make sense so far? Now, these are not secondary dominants. These are dominant functioning chords that are diatonic. They are the chords that have a dominant function within the key of G major, no accidentals involved. The idea of a secondary dominant is that we are going to use accidentals to recreate these shapes and recreate the sensation of a leading tone within them, but it's tonicizing a note that is not a tonic. It's going to make us perceive something that is not one as being one. Does everyone have this written down? Can I erase? Okay. We'll stay in the key of G. And let's imagine that in the key of G, we wanted to make another scale degree that isn't 1 sound like 1. For example, the note D. Well, we know that in order to do this, we need 2 things. We need a leading tone that will take us to D, and we need to incorporate that leading tone into one of our 5 dominant shapes. The leading tone is easy. Vasilisa, what would be the leading tone that would take us to D?
Sharp.
C sharp is correct. We can imagine this C sharp resolving up by minor second to D. Now, we need to surround that C sharp with one of our 5 dominant shapes, and we have our choice: 5, 5-7, 7, 7 half diminished, or fully diminished. Why don't we, for our first example, choose 5-7. When we label this harmony that we're about to build, we want to label it 5-7 because that describes the shape, but it's not 5-7 in relation to 1. It is 5-7 in relation to this note, which in the key of G would be 5, exactly. So it is 5-7 of 5. 5-7 in relation to 5. Thinking back to our 5 dominant shapes, you will remember that in order to build a 5-7 chord, the leading tone needs to be in the 3rd position. So we can actually construct a chord around this leading tone. This way. The last step is that we need to verify that this chord has the correct quality of thirds. Our 5-7 shape, Niles, had what quality of thirds inside of it?
Major, minor, minor.
Major, minor, minor is correct. So this is what we're going for, and we need to verify that it's what we have. From A to C sharp is
Major third.
C sharp to E is,
Minor third.
and E to G is
Minor third.
exactly. So we do have the correct quality we're looking for, and this chord we could call 5/7 of 5. Now, a very common mistake that I see when students analyze secondary dominance is they look at a chord like this, and we're in the key of G. They observe that the chord is built on top of A, which of course it is, and I would see them label it this way: major 2, 7. But this is not correct. Because as soon as we incorporate accidentals, we're changing the function of the chord. It's not functioning as a 2 chord anymore. Instead, it is an artificial dominant which propels us towards scale degree 5. Does this make sense? Let's hear the difference in sound between a diatonic 2 chord taking us to 5 and an altered 2 chord functioning as a secondary dominant. Here's G major. In the key of G major, here's 1, going to 2 in first inversion, going to 5, and back to 1. Now the same progression with the 2 chord replaced with a secondary dominant, a 5/7 of 5. 1, going to 5/7 of 5, going to 5, and back to 1. One more time, the first progression. And with the secondary dominant. Like this. Let's try another example, just for funsies. In a different key. How about your favorite key? Which is
D.
D major? Okay. In the key of D major, let's imagine that we wanted to create a 7, fully diminished 7 of 2. Okay? We can go through it step by step. It helps to think about where we're going. We want this chord to tonicize scale degree number 2, and in the key of D, that would be what? And they all shout it out together. Scale degree 2 in the key of D is
E.
E, exactly. So E is where we're going. And we need various things to take us there. First, we need a leading tone of E, which would be which note?
D sharp.
D sharp. So here's our D sharp. And in a 7, fully diminished 7 shape, that leading tone of D sharp would be located in what position within the chord? It's the root. So we can build a 7 chord with the D sharp in the root. There it is. And lastly, we need to verify that it has the correct quality of thirds, that it has the correct shape. The shape that we're looking for, you can verify on your notes, is minor, minor, minor third. So we need to double check this. D sharp to F sharp is what quality?
Minor.
F sharp to A is what quality?
Minor.
A to C sharp is?
Major.
So what can we do to fix that?
Natural.
Use a C natural instead. This gives us the correct quality, and the chord we're left with is 7, fully diminished 7 of 2. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Now there is a second way of thinking about this. This is the foolproof way. You start with the shape, you calculate the leading tone, and it will invariably take you to the right spot. But once you have a little more experience with these types of harmonies, it's possible to think about them as kind of a telescoping series of keys. That in order to find 7 of 2 in the key of D, you just think to yourself, okay, 2 is E, and 7 of E would be the note D sharp, and so on and so forth. And whatever method you want to use in the long term is fine. However, I think it's very, very valuable to have this information, and not just for creating the chords, but also for analyzing. Let's imagine that we stay in the key of D major, and we encounter the following chord. the best way to analyze this chord is to start with the shape and see if we recognize it as being one of our 5 dominant shape possibilities. E to G sharp is
Major.
major, thank you. G sharp to B,
Minor.
B to D,
Minor.
and taken all together, is this shape familiar as one of our 5 dominant shapes? It is which one? 5-7. So we know that this is a 5-7 shape that might be functioning as a secondary dominant in relation to some scale degree that is not the tonic. All we have to do is figure out which one, and to do this, we can think the leading tone is in the 3rd position. If our leading tone G sharp goes up by minor second, it would tonicize the note A, and A in the key of D is 5. Therefore, this chord must be 5-7 or 5. But that classification would be much more difficult to arrive at if we weren't familiar with the dominant functioning shape. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a valuable method for reasons that are twofold. Now, 2 additional notes about secondary dominance. Let's imagine ourselves in the key of good old friendly C major. Okay? My friend in the front row. What's your name?
Simon.
Simon. C major. Picture it in your head. No sharps, no flats. Yes? Okay, great. In the key of C major, what would be 5 of 4?
5 of 4.
Let's go through it step by step. 4 would be what note?
4 would be F.
F, exactly.
Nothing.
Don't panic. Okay, so 4 is F, right? You
Yeah.
need a leading tone of F, and what would that be?
G sharp. E.
It would be E. All right, now that leading tone for a 5 shape would be the 3rd of a chord, right? So let's imagine a chord around the E. We have a C below it and a G above it to complete the triad, so C, E, G. Now we need to double check the quality. A 5 triad has the quality major 3rd, minor 3rd. C to E is, and E to G is, so C, E, G would be 5 of 4. Agreed? But Joanne, what is the problem with this? If we see the chord C, E, G in the key of C major, we're just going to think it's a 1 chord, right? And so 5 of 4 in a major key is actually not possible as a secondary dominant because it just results in a 1 chord. Exactly. Now, 5-7 of 4 is a different story. Simon, let's imagine 5-7 of 4 in the key of C major. C, E, G would be the same, but on top of this we would have another note, a 7th, B. And if we check the shapes, we see that C to E is major, E to G is minor, and G to B is major, which is not correct. So we need to adjust this by using a B flat. You got it. And that B flat is a signal to our ears that this chord is coming from outside of the key and not functioning as a diatonic 1 chord anymore, but rather as a secondary dominant 5-7 that's going to guide us to 4th. Does this make sense?
Yes.
All right. This brings me to an important point, which is that every secondary dominant, in order to be effective, must incorporate an accidental of some kind. Absolutely must, except, and there is always one exception, here it is. We'll be in a minor key, your favorite minor key, which is, I know there's a lot of good choices.
F sharp minor.
Yeah, right.
No. Okay, we'll go with, well, I do like D minor, but we already did that. E minor?
E minor is great. In the key of E minor, let's see if we can calculate 5-7 of 3. The first thing we need to do is figure out which note is 3, right? So in the key of E minor, 3 would be G. There it is. We need a leading tone that's going to take us to 3, and the leading tone of G would be what note? So here's our F sharp. Now, that leading tone in a 5-7 shape is going to be the 3rd of the chord, so we can build a 7th chord around it this way. We need to double check the quality of those thirds. For a 5-7 shape, we're looking for major, minor. D to F sharp is major. F sharp to A is,
Minor.
A to C is,
Minor.
so we're good, right? We actually have the correct quality for 5, 7, and 3, that presumably will resolve to 3, but we didn't use any accidentals. And yet, this is a functional secondary dominant. How can that be?
Because there's an accidental in the key.
Well, we do have 1 sharp in the key signature, that's true, but what I mean by not incorporating any accidentals is there are no notes from outside of the key signature in this chord. And yet, it does work as a secondary dominant. Why? Well, in the key of E minor, what kind of D would we normally expect to find?
A sharp.
A D sharp for the raised leading tone. And as soon as that D sharp disappears and we have D natural instead, it's going to guide our ears naturally towards the relative major, which in this case is G major. So by not employing a chromatic alteration in a minor key, it is actually possible to create a secondary dominant of 3, which is the relative major. And that's another important exception to know about. Any questions about that? Matt?
Could we hear that
Of course.
difference?
So in the key of E minor, here is a straightforward progression. 1, going to 4, to 5, 7, to 1. And now, here's our secondary dominant of 3, resolving to 3. And if we wanted to, we could use a 5, 7 next, and return to Does that answer your question, Alex?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions about secondary dominance in general, about these specific examples that we talked over?